And welcome back to Stories from the River. Well, we're set up a little bit differently today, and we've got a brand new series we're super excited about. We took several of our leaders. Manny and Stacey are here with me today, and we took several of our leaders again this year, just like we did last year, to World Business Forum in New York City, where we got to hear some dynamic, powerful speakers. And what we thought we'd do this year is just to recap each speaker one at a time and do an episode on it. So, Manny, welcome back to the pod. Stacey, welcome back to the pod.
It's good to be back. Good to be back, Coach. It's good to be here with you today, too.
Absolutely.
I like this new setup.
To the conversation.
Yeah, it's a great setup.
Welcome to Stories from the River, a show in which we go behind the scenes at Broad River Retail.
So the first speaker I thought we'd start off with is the guy who opened the event this year. And this year's theme, World Business Forum, WOBI, has a theme every year. This year's theme was purpose.
You want to win with purpose, with ambition.
It's not faith in technology. It's faith in people.
Every day is a day that we can prepare ourselves even more.
We want to boldly go where we haven't gone.
The X factor of great leadership we found is not personality, but humility.
Leaders change things for the better.
And one of our favorite speakers and writers and authors and management thinkers is Jim Collins. And so Jim opened with a powerful keynote. And Manny, you've got a great phrase for what you call his talk.
Yeah, we love Jim Collins. We reference him quite frequently. And I felt like this message he had is he was pretty much walking us through his greatest hits. This was like Jim Collins' greatest hits, going back through Good to Great to B 2.0 and all of his, studies, and just kind of bringing it all together in just one amazing recap.
Oh yeah, I thought that it's my first time seeing him in person. I've seen him on a webinar before, but never in person, and I just felt like that was really kind of what I got from it. He referenced most of his books, a lot of Good to Great, more so probably than anything else, but just the way that he thinks about things and articulates them really is understandable, makes a lot of sense for what we need to do to be successful in our careers and in life.
Yeah, he had one of the best WOBI master classes. I think it was 3 days, 2 or 3 hours per day, and he took us through all of that. Many people have read Good to Great, probably one of his, maybe if not arguably his most famous book. He also wrote Built to Last and How the Mighty Fall. And Jim's approach is very much research-driven, data-backed. I want to recommend this book. This is probably my favorite book of his, Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0. Now, it's kind of a reissue of his original book, but he added a lot of new content. And we've done a couple book clubs with this. I've been through this book 2 or 3 times. It's heavily marked up. And like his greatest hits are also embedded within here with his mentor, Bill Lazier. So he wrote this originally many years ago, and then it's like 40 or 50% of it is brand new content with the original content. So what Jim did on his talk at World Business Forum, he basically took us through his 12 questions and then his map. And he took us through the entire map, which he's very fond of, and it's great. So I thought maybe we'd start and we would just go through his 12 questions. And so
let's do it.
His first question was, where are we on our journey to level 5 leadership? And so he references, Good to Great, chapters 1 and 2, Great by Choice, chapters 1 and 2, and Good to Great in the social sectors, the full monograph. So where are we on our level 5 leadership? And he really talks about L5 versus L4. He said humility versus will. And he said most L5 leaders had a charisma bypass, but he really goes into the story of Katharine Graham, which he's told before. She took over the Washington Post after her husband passed away, and how courageous she was. And he talks a little bit about Darwin Smith from Kimberly-Clark, Sell the Mills, Darwin Smith. And Kimberly was, Katharine Graham, her quote was, I'm just trying to be the best I can. And Darwin Smith was, I was just trying to be qualified for the job. And so what were some of your takeaways on the first question where you talked about Katharine Graham and Darwin Smith, Manny?
Well, I think, and I love that first question, starting off with kind of the approach, right? That level 5 leadership. it is, to your point, is something that Jim has studied and researched how a level 5 leader shows up, and the approach and the stories that he shared, which I loved, and both were stories that we have heard before, was rooted in, number one, humility, humility, and knowing that they have to be a continued desire to learn. And so both, Catherine Smith, they were both focused on, how can I get better?
Yeah.
And even down to asking Warren Buffett to be like her mentor, and to be okay with kind of giving up some, just knowing that, hey, I don't know everything, but if I ask the right questions and have the right approach, well, let's just start there.
Yeah.
And having that. So I thought it was a great start.
That's like a common theme from a lot of the WOBI speakers was, being like an Olympic learner.
That's right.
or continuous learner.
Yeah, I think, he started out by saying good is the enemy of great, right? So I've always had this saying that better is the enemy of good, because we all, say we're doing better, but are we really doing good? So I think that takes it, to me, it just kind of, it kind of took that emphasis to another level. So good being the enemy of great. And then the other thing that he said, and I think this really kind of resonates through the humility, is questions are better than answers. And, great leaders ask great questions. But we have this sense sometimes to download everything we know to people and be the person with all the answers. And to be that level 5 leader, you got to be willing to go ask questions of the people that are in the business that day doing the work to figure out what needs to be done. And then, I think along the lines of the story with Catherine Graham was that she had a passionate dedication to her company, and, being thrust into that when her husband committed suicide, and just really understanding that she didn't have to go do that. They had plenty of money, but she had a passionate dedication to the company to see the company, survive and thrive. And then the other thing is that the only way to fulfill purpose is to act. And her having the humility to say, I don't know everything. As a matter of fact, I don't know enough. And then make smart decisions like the mentor of Warren Buffett, or saying things like, if I can learn, I can lead.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really powerful.
Well, I think that's right. The Socratic approach, and asking questions reminds me of what we've studied with Keith Cunningham, asking those questions of ourselves. And, so humility, one, to be a learner, but also will. I mean, when they were going through their IPO at the Washington Post, and there was this thing, do we publish the Pentagon Papers or do we not? And her board chair says, well, I guess I probably wouldn't publish. And she published anyways, and their stock crashed during Watergate, and she didn't flinch. But that was like a short-term crash, because he said, if you looked at their stock compared to the Dow over a period of time, they grew 3,000% versus the Dow's average of being 227%. So I think that will, that indomitable will, goes along with that humility, and he, is juxtaposed with it or paired with it, and he said the level 5 ecosystem, to expand it beyond the leader today, he would say pockets of greatness on minibuses that we drive. Don't just look at the leader, but look at the entire ecosystem. All right. Moving on to question number 2. Do we practice first who with the right people on the bus and then the key seats? And so his deal here is first who, then what? And, he says the goal should be to try to get 80 to 90% of your key seats filled with the right people. And if that's not it, then you know what your number one priority is, right? And he said the mistakes of, many leaders have when they don't get rid of the right people, or the people who need to get off the bus. Sometimes it's either did they act too quickly, or did they wait too long? He asked us that question. And more times than not is they waited too long. It wasn't because they waited too, and so there's different approaches here, right? Do you develop the right people, or do you replace the right people? And he said, he asked most people what they would do. They said 50-50. He said, you know what, that's what the data says, 50-50. So you can take either approach. And he cited different leaders, like you can go try to develop the right people, or you can try to replace. I don't know if you have a certain bias, if you either of you have a bias towards developing or replacing, but he says first who, then what. So get the right people on the bus. So what do you think on question 2, and kind of where do you stand on develop versus replace?
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the core principles of good to great, and so I love this one. We've used it for years, and we try to practice it in our people decisions, because it does start with who first. I mean, so as you think about the concept, it's you got to have the right people, right? So let's start there, and then you have these seats on the bus, and you got to figure. And sometimes I think he mentioned sometimes it's taking someone who's the right who and putting them on the right seat. So, and that can, you can see a lot of progress there. And it's only then when you have the right people, they're in the right seats, that you can then, drive the heck out of that bus and really start moving. But back to your point, I think it is a matter of preference and a matter of kind of how we, plan and act. But I think that is the key concept, is that you have to have a plan and act on it. And so my preference, my style is one of developing, right? Like I think that if you have gone through the rigor of getting the right people on the team, well, then I think we have an obligation. We have to develop and to work with, and to have clarity on what that is. And so I prefer to lean into the develop, and to a point to where, okay, well, maybe this just isn't the right bus, right? And then you have to have that conversation as well.
So this really fits in with one of the principles in our operating system that we operate the department off of, which is Mr. Mo, obviously, and it's right people, right seat, right? So we believe.
Tell our audience what Mr. Mo is.
So Mr. Mo, EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating Systems, is a widely known and used deal, and we have a kind of a hybrid version of that we developed for us. EOS is probably highly punitive, and certainly we're not. But it's called Mr. Mo, and what Mr. Mo stands for is more right, more often. And so, you can't expect perfection. As a matter of fact, I think one of the things that Jenny Romedy said was that perfection is the killer of progress, right? So ultimately, more right, more often, but they has 6 core principles, and one of them is right people, right seat. And so when he started talking about this was great, but I've never heard who, then what spin on it until I read Good to Great. So when you look through that whole thing, you start looking at it, okay, who, then what? What it really comes down to, he says, is if you get the right who's, the what's happen automatically, or they happen at a high level. I think that I would tilt toward, he talks about, do you tilt towards replace or do you tilt toward develop? And I would say I tilt toward develop. What I do believe, though, is that we need to be urgent about that development at a certain point, because I think if we are too slow to replace once we've tried to develop, then what happens is I think it becomes an indictment on our leadership. So ultimately, I would say I tilt to develop, but I also believe that there should be we should put some urgency behind that to give everyone what they need to be successful. And then once we realize they're in the wrong seat, they're probably already a little bit miserable themselves. So we got to do what's right by them and everybody else in the organization to keep from creating the culture that is against what it is we're trying to develop.
Yeah. I love this question. How can you change every what question to a who question?
Oh, yeah.
That was a powerful question. Okay. That was great. Thank you, guys. Let's move to question number 3. Where must we replace the tyranny of the or with the genius of the and? And so the genius of the and doesn't mean that like you can either do this or this. They're not mutually exclusive. And so that kind of goes in with this thing about disciplined thought and what are the brutal facts and how can we better live the Stockdale paradox? And Jim Stockdale, who Jim Collins is famous for kind of telling the story and telling it well, who was prisoner of war for 8 years and he survived. And how did he not capitulate to despair? He never lost faith, but he also he wasn't just an optimist. He wasn't had faith divorced from reality. He was a pragmatist. He accepted the brutal facts. He knew it sucked what he was going through, but he always knew that this would be the defining moment that he would look back on and tell others about. And so Jim asked him, well, who didn't make it out from the prisoner camp? And he goes, that's easy. And Jim Collins would say, who, the pessimist? Oh no, the optimist. those who said, oh, we're going to get out right here at Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter. And when that would come and pass and they wouldn't get out, they'd lose all hope. So the key is not to lose hope, but it's faith in facts. Or I think, Stacey, you like to call this love and math. So I'll start with you, Stacey.
I think it really does resonate in love and math, right? Love being, we're responsible for people. So, and people want to do great. So when you have folks that are working in your care, it's not you do this or else. It's you do this and you can count on me to do this, right? And so for me, math's the truth absent of conjecture, and so I think that the genius of the and is that there's always an and. There can always be an and. We just have to search for it.
Yeah, like having a great SPG and a great secret sauce.
Absolutely.
It's not either or.
They're not mutually exclusive, right? That's it. I mean, I've been told, well, if we take away their inability to negotiate, we're not going to sell much. Well, number one is I've never said we would take that away. I said if we will follow the process and lean into the rules of engagement that we have, then guess what? We can get both, which gives us more freedom.
That's right.
To do more business.
That's right. Manny, you got anything on this one?
Yeah, no, I think and more cowbell. I mean, there's a lot more.
Absolutely.
So I love I mean, and I've heard you say it over and over again, which I appreciate, is the love and math, and I love how that kind of, when I think about this story and this message from Jim, I think it points to one of our main core values of collaboration. I mean, I think and is all about collaboration and how we collaborate, how we come together, and how we make better decisions together. And so let's not miss that opportunity to embrace the and build on the and, because I know that we'll have a better result because of it.
Yeah.
One more thing, like everything I do, I got off somebody else anyway, right? Like there's hardly anything original. If I wouldn't have taken all the ands that came my way in life, I wouldn't have developed very far.
Yeah. Right? That's a good point. Well, and I just combined questions 3 and 4 because the 4 was, what are the brutal facts? How can we better live the Stockdale paradox? So I think we answered both of those. So question 5, do we make disciplined decisions within the 3 circles of the hedgehog concept? And so, do we make disciplined decisions? And once we got clear on the concept, we must go straight ahead. So he talked about this like 3-circle Venn diagram, like passion. What's your passion? What can you be best in the world at? And what best drives our economic engine? And where those 3 things intersect, and so do more of those things. And he talks about really, there's 2 types of hedgehogs: the content hedgehog, he referenced Southwest Airlines, or the process hedgehog. He talked about Amgen or Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett. So which type of hedgehog are you? So when you think about disciplined decisions within the 3 circles of the hedgehog concept, Manny, what do you think about?
I think about clarity. I think it provides clarity. I mean, I think this is another, Jim is a great storyteller. And so I think the reason why it resonates with a lot of us, and hopefully with a lot of the listeners, is he tells the story and he gives examples of companies that we know, and he tells us how this shows up within those companies. And so when he talks about Southwest being content driven and how they kind of have that clarity around here's how we're going to operate, and here's our why of how we operate this way, and we're just going to continue to be focused on this clarity. It's the same thing with Warren Buffett and his process clarity. Like he has a process and he stays true to the process, and it's gone pretty well for him. So I think it's a when I think about the hedgehog, I think about it's a process to really get clarity.
Yeah, when I look at it, I think that's great. When I look at it, I think it really comes down to, I think it goes back to the who's on the bus and who's in the right, are they in the right seat? Because I think that, it's good to have, you can have somebody who's passionate about something, and we know what the biggest economic return is, but they may not be in their wheelhouse. They might not be the world's best at it. So how do we as leaders lean into that and put people in the position that they can be really, really successful? Now, obviously you got to have clarity to do that. Right. So, but for me, I looked at that from a external thing, others, and then I looked at it kind of internally, and I think about, you know, where I was 3.5 years ago coming to work at Broad River Retail. I'm highly passionate. This is what I've always been best at. I've been good at a lot of things, but this is certainly the thing that I've been best at. And then, you know, I also know that there were economic drivers. That was it matched the economic goal, right?
Well, and that to me, that's the biggest point. Because like, if you were the best at, if you had a great passion for playing the violin and you were the best in the world at it, but you came to work at Broad River Retail to deploy that, say, well, let me play the violin in the stores. I'm like, Stacey, I'm not sure that's driving our economic engine.
Exactly.
We got to get back to the sales
That's
process
exactly
thing
right.
that you do.
Ain't
Go
no
do
doubt
that, more of
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
We got, and then do more of that, and then we can open up and talk about the violin playing. But, you know, some people might look at the clarity and the focus as a constraint. And what Jim said is, a hedgehog is not about constraints, it's about expansion.
That's right.
So once you do that, you can go do more of that. And that's the disciplined decision. You know, focus is a finite resource, but that focus can create the expansion. But Stacey, to your point, he said that's how you gain momentum. And we know, what is it you say about momentum? How do you have to push it in the beginning?
Oh, it's well, from Craig Rochelle, there's a disproportionate amount of energy that it takes to get the exit velocity that you need to create momentum.
Yeah.
So once you've lost it, either by, you know, too much success, we'll talk about that in a little bit, or, you know, a significant event, to recreate it, it takes a disproportionate amount of exit velocity, which means you have to over-index your energy and your talent and your focus and your clarity to going and taking these things and doing them not just to the level you were doing it when you were good before, but even more so to get that momentum back.
Yeah, and I'm sure Groeschel is a fan of Jim Collins and is well read and knows that, like, to push the flywheel, and this is a segue into question 6, it takes a lot of effort in the beginning before you get that thing spun up going much faster on its own. So you have to do that extraordinary effort in the beginning once you get focused and started off. Maybe you're starting a new goal or something. It's going to be a little bit harder to push to get that momentum going. Okay, so question 6 was, what is our flywheel and how far can it go? And so this kind of goes into disciplined action. What is our flywheel and how far can it go? So he went into the Amazon.com story and he talks about the 3 key criteria of a great flywheel. And then every element should begin with a verb to denote action. And he talks about various types of flywheels. You can have one that's fuel, one that's about contribution. But Manny, what about you? What were your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, when I think about the flywheel, and I think Coach hit it really well there. It's about generating excitement. It's about generating momentum that has, you know, that once you're past the test portion of it, that has staying power and that you can build upon. And then ultimately, when the flywheel's really going, it's less of you, right? You become more of a kind of, chief reminding officer, or you're there helping it, but you have so many other hands of folks that are now bought into the clarity of that vision, to the purpose behind why we're doing this together and what this is all about, that flywheel just continues to go faster and faster and faster. And so, yeah, I think the momentum is a big part of it. It fuels, it fuels that flywheel to go faster and faster.
Absolutely. I the whole time I'm thinking of the flywheel, I'm thinking about a sprocket, and what I'm thinking about is when I was a kid and riding a bicycle, and you put out more effort and energy getting that thing started. You remember standing on that pedal, pulling back on those handlebars to create as much force as you can to get that thing going. And once you get it going, you can probably even take a couple of rounds off, right? And then it'll continue on with the momentum. So I just thought that's what I kept thinking about. But I also thought about, as a kid, the amount of just like, I would say, true, like, innocent passion that you had to ride the bike, and how that was fun, and how that was something you loved to do. And I think that we have to create environments that will fuel it that way.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I think about when he talked about it was that you've got to identify the steps that are going to keep your flywheel going, right?
Yeah.
And because if you have any one of those pieces that don't pull their weight, if any one of those places along the way aren't pulling their weight, or aren't as he called it, a 9 or a 10, then what happens? Well, what happens is you lose that momentum because it takes a lot to get it going.
Yeah.
It doesn't take as much to keep it going, but it takes a lot to keep it going too.
Well, and
got to keep feeding it.
At one point, our flywheel, maybe we thought it was operating furniture stores, but we had to get real clear and focused. It was operating Ashley stores. So we had a second concept, Savvy Spaces, and we shut that down. And once we did that, we cut off the drag, and we were able to, that flywheel was able to go a lot faster. So opening and operating and running and propelling Ashley stores became the flywheel. Okay, moving on to question 7. I know we love this topic. It's the 20-mile marches. And talks about, so have we embraced 20-mile march discipline in every element of our flywheel? So he talks about the story from Antarctica and the 2 teams that, to be the first to reach the South Pole, but they took different approaches. The same size teams, but very different results. And so one team made it, and unfortunately one team did not. So Manny, you want to tell us what your take on this 20-mile march discipline?
Sure. Yeah. I know it's one of our favorite stories, one of my favorite stories for sure. And so this whole story has to do with the different tacks that both teams took. And so one decided to get up and go, and it was a beautiful day. And so we're going to go as hard as we can. And then the next day when it rained, well, we'll save our energy and we'll rest up for the next beautiful day. And so they were very reactive to kind of the environment, right? Reacting to kind of what was going on outside, where Team B committed to getting up every day and walking 20 miles, doing that march consistently, no matter the weather, no matter the circumstances. And so they became weather tested essentially, and got to their goal, whereas the first team didn't make it. And I think there's so much wisdom. We talk about getting up every day and sowing the seeds, not worried about the harvest. That harvest will come, but just getting in the routine, getting in the habit of getting today's work done, and building off that every day. It's a really, really good story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, it talks about one becoming a victim of their circumstances and the other one creating their circumstances, right? Yeah. And driving and understanding that the weather was a circumstance, and yeah, it might not be great. However, we still got to get our 20 miles in if we're going to make it, right? And I think that I would give you guys like really good props because of where we're at as an organization. I think you guys have done this. Like you've not always done what was easy. Mm-hmm. You always didn't take the same path that other folks did, but you had a destination that you wanted to try to work towards every day, and we're still on that march. Mm-hmm. We're not there yet. However, we're farther up that march and farther up that line, and we've seen results when things have been tough because you guys were committed to, hey, no, we're not. Yeah, I'd love to do that and go have that happen. Mm-hmm. However, that doesn't fit in our plan. We got to get our 20 miles. Yeah. And so I think that for me, what it says is that behaviors, doing the right things right over and over and over again, more right, more often, right, is going to get you to where you need to be. And you may not always be popular. Yeah. And it might not always be easy, but man, it'll be worth it.
And it's just that daily discipline, the boring daily discipline. You can't make it up. You can't win a diet by, eating what you want one day and then going to try to go burn off that diet day 2. You got to do it consistently well. It's the boring daily discipline. He said the 20-mile march solves the problem of the short term versus the long term. It's the genius of the and. It activates the short term and long term at the same time, is what his research showed. So unfortunately, Robert Falcon Scott and every member of his team died 11 miles short of the South Pole. And I think it's Amundsen was the 20-mile marcher and their team, and they made it there. So we love that discipline and win the day mindset.
That's right.
And setting standards of what you're going to do each day. So question 8, another one of my favorites. What bullets and cannonballs should we fire to renew and extend our flywheel? So you got to have discernment on your disciplined action here. And so he really says, first fire bullets, calibrate, then fire your cannonballs. I think of this about like playing poker or something. You don't like go all in on your first hand. You got to kind of understand how the game's being played, what the other folks are playing. Or I think about this like staying in the game.
Yeah.
Like don't get overextended. Don't go out over your skis. Live within your harvest. He said he gave this great story from Steve Jobs and Apple's 2002 10K. He said the iPod was mentioned in the 10K for their 2002 annual report as a natural extension of our digital hub strategy. It was just a bullet. Now it's a massive cannonball flywheel. So anyways, I love that one, renew and extend. First fire bullets, then cannonballs.
Coach, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the iPod was the forerunner of what we have nowadays in our hand. That's the most powerful piece of technology that we've ever walked around with, right? So it's huge about access and things of that nature. But I think for me, it goes back to it's sometimes really, really easy to throw the Hail Mary. If a football team came out and they threw a bomb on every play, they probably wouldn't be that successful. Mm-hmm. And I think it really comes down to there is a core set of disciplines that a company needs to go. And it doesn't mean don't take chances. It means mitigate your risk, right? Mitigate your risk. Stay in the game. It's Simon Sinek, the infinite game versus the finite game. So that's kind of was my take there.
Yeah.
It's a great way to look at it. I'd never heard it till I got into his stuff. So,
go ahead, man.
Oh, I was just gonna say. I mean, I love that. I actually like So we practice this a lot with kind of experiments that we run, and this is So we like to fire shots first, gunshots first, because it helps us kind of understand kind of where we're at. It gives us a point of reference. Okay, well, here's what worked, here's what didn't. And then we just calibrate. And then when you really get that sweet spot, when you're like, oh, this is working. Okay, now what can we do? Then enter cannonball. And so, I think it has a lot to do with process, has a lot to do with kind of running the experiment, but also ultimately, to your point, Coach, it is about kind of understanding kind of the rules in the game and staying in that game. Hey, Carl and Mark are doing this now with the 3X. We're running an experiment with three or four of our bigger locations with some enhancements to the 3X. Well, the 3X works phenomenal. Our team loves it, but we feel like we can make it even better. But rather than go out and just cannonball that thing, we're going to fire a few bullets and then we'll calibrate a little bit. And we think it's going to be magical for just not only doing more business, but doing it more profitably.
Yeah. Constantly renew and extend. And experiments beget more experiments, and which begets more sophistication. iPod became the iPhone, became the iPad, became the Apple Watch, became all the i tools that are now kind of each their own flywheel. And so 3X enhance, and then who knows where we'll take it. So that's a great one. So question 9, where should we channel our productive paranoia to avoid the 5 stages of decline? His first step here is what we just said, don't die. First step is don't die. And he talked about how the mighty fall, how they self-destruct. And he says the 5 stages of decline, from the first 3 stages, you still look great. None of those stages of decline are visible, but the first stage, hubris, is born of success. You have this outrageous arrogance, the hubris of purpose. So anyways, Stacey, what were your takeaways on productive paranoia to avoid the 5 stages of decline?
Yeah, unfortunately, this kind of hits a little close to home in a business venture that I had earlier in my life. So, but I always say it, and people kind of roll their eyes at me a little bit, but you're the closest to failure at your greatest point of success. And I've heard that throughout my life and throughout my career. But what happens is, the landscape of business is always moving, and somebody's always out there improving. And if we get comfortable, then what happens? We fall. And I think this concept of productive paranoia basically says, go to work and show up every day like you haven't accomplished anything. That's kind of how I look at it. And even though we've accomplished a lot, it's like you've not accomplished anything.
And that's the attitude of it. But there's also the, hey, make sure you have cash on your balance sheet. Make sure you don't have excessive leverage. Make sure that you're prepared for surprises. He said history is the study of surprises, not things that weren't surprises. Any other things on this one?
I think you referenced it earlier. I think when I think about this, his whole built to last, it really reminds me of Keith Cunningham's work on, questions. What questions aren't you asking? And so having that paranoia around, okay, the what ifs, like what ifs. And so I think you take that with a openness and a mindset of being that, learning athlete that we heard about earlier as well. And that's how kind of you got to keep both of those in check. If you're going to be built to last, you're going to have staying power and be relevant. You got to, number one, make sure that you're thinking about those, what could be around the corner. And then number two, you have to continue to go look and see, continue to be that Olympic athlete when it comes to learning it and want to kind of get better every day.
What's the danger, right?
Yeah, that's right. What's the danger that you don't see? What's the blind spots? And
Mhm.
I think productive paranoia would lead a company to run stress tests to understand, are we ready for like these what if scenarios? Well, it's not the plan that's important. It's the process of planning, of thinking through, think about it, how a bank might think about it. What could go wrong? Those aren't always the sexiest or funnest questions to answer, especially for like entrepreneurs or sales leaders. We want to think about what's going to go right. However, sometimes we have to go, well, let's be pragmatists here and think what could go wrong and make sure that we can stay in the game.
That's right.
And when you think about like people's lives at stake or their livelihoods and their jobs and their families, it sobers you up really quick to make sure that you stay in the game and don't die. So moving on to question 10, have we made the shift from time telling to clock building? What does he mean by that, Manny?
Part of this is, goes back to a core principle of leadership. Leadership is communication. And so, are we active? Are we in that game? Are we staying relevant, and not just kind of watching that time and being comfortable, right? I mean, we look at stasis and we know that stasis becomes, you become irrelevant, you become obsolete. And so, to me, it has a lot to do with, don't forget, it's a reminder around how important communication is and how to continue to proceed with that communication to stay relevant.
To me, it's just redundancy, right? It's being redundant, and redundant is not necessarily the to your point, the most attractive word, but I think what happens is sometimes when you've been in especially when you've been in a position or you've been in a situation for a long, long time and you built it and you know where all of that came from, if we don't teach people that, then they have no way of knowing. And I think that sometimes as leaders, we assume that they already know. So what we'll do is just say it's 9:15 instead of saying, wait a minute, do you understand how it got to 9:15? Yeah. Like, let's go in here and see, do you understand how we got here? And do you understand how to do it yourself in case, someone's not here?
Yeah, that's so important. All right, that's great. I'm not going to add anything to what you guys said. We'll move straight to question 11. How can we better embody, preserve the core / stimulate progress? And do we need a BHAG? So he says we need to do both, preserve the core and stimulate progress. So, and then BHAG, stimulate progress, big, hairy, audacious goals, stimulate progress. And he even goes through 4 common types of BHAGs, the quantitative target, the creative impact, the role model, or the common enemy. And he said, in the ideal time frame for a great BHAG, he says it's 10 to 25 years. That seems like a long time to me. I always thought that was a long time, especially for a company that's only celebrating its 20-year anniversary today. However, that's kind of what he has said. And you can have long-term plans. I think you can also have a little bit shorter duration BHAGs as well to stimulate progress. So, Manny, what do you think about preserving the core while stimulating progress?
Yeah. I mean, knowing who we are, like, so what's our core beliefs? What do we stand for? What's our purpose behind what we do? And then vision casting, right? The great thing about a BHAG is, when done the right way, it gets everyone excited or aligned to where we're going, and so and how we get there. And he mentioned, like, it needs to be a little itchy. It needs to make you feel a little uncomfortable. If it isn't, then there's not enough, of the H in it, or it's not aggressive enough. It shouldn't be a layup. 10, 20 years, I agree. Feels feels a little long, Jim. But I think that it's a good, again, to me, when I hear number 11, it speaks to vision casting.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to vision casting. I also believe that it speaks to knowing your purpose and being able to create alignment, because both of those things are super important. And when you know what your purpose is, then you can, and you know what your goals are, then you can get a team aligned around that. But you can't if the purpose is not good.
Yeah.
Because it takes trust and ownership, right?
That's exactly right.
So ultimately, I believe that no matter which one of these four it is, that they have to be rooted in purpose, and then you have to create clarity and then alignment around it, so that you can all be rowing the boat in the same direction. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing's more powerful than a group of people with a common goal."
Yeah. I think you're spot on. He also talked about core values too.
Yeah.
So knowing your core values and your core purpose, getting that aligned, super, super powerful. All right, the 12th question. There's going to be luck. What is our return on luck? Whether good luck or bad, and how can we increase it? So, that's what do you do with the luck that you get? Make sure that you're putting yourself in position to take advantage of it.
Yeah. So I carry around a little fortune cookie piece that I used to tell people all the time that you don't depend on luck. Don't depend on luck. In our business, one of the things that happens to people, especially in the sales world, is that they believe that they just got lucky.
Yeah.
Right. That was the magic guest or whatever. But what this thing said, and it was the best HFC salesperson I've ever had work with me in my entire career. And she hands it to me one day, and it says, "Luck has a peculiar way of favoring those who don't depend on it." And so I think the hardest working, best, most connected and engaged people are able to get a return on luck, no matter what the luck is.
Well said. We could just leave that one right there.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love it.
So he also talked about, what he's working on next. And he's got an 8-year research project. I can't wait to see what comes out of this. And he said 50% of the cases are women. So he's got some diversity in the approach, and he's debunking 2 myths. One of them, which is under age 50, that's the first primary path to a meaningful life, is to find a path to purpose. And he says first finding what one is deeply encoded for. And he talks about the geneticist and jumping genes and how she won the Nobel Prize. What are you encoded for? So he debunks this myth under age 50. And then he talks about this, our best, most creative, most productive work comes before age 50. And he talked about the story of Robert Plant being partnered with Alison Krauss. And for many people, early decades are a warm up. And he says Toni Morrison, age 56, she wrote, what she did at age 56 and what she did after age 60. And how Jack Vogel, he had these eyes. He said, I want to have Jack Vogel's eyes. Even if the body fails, you still got the eyes to look out. Jack Vogel created the S&P 500. And oftentimes I've heard him say, with his discipline and how he approaches life, that Peter Drucker had this wall of books. And he said, well, hey, he pointed to him and said, well, most of them were written like after age 60 or 70 or something, age 50, not most of them before, so that you can still have a productive, meaningful life after you've kind of gotten warmed up. So I thought those were pretty interesting elements to what he's working on his next research project.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, one of the things about Jim is that he has a system. And he has a process of how he goes through his research. So knowing that he's put in thousands of hours into this next chapter is going to be exciting to kind of see what the results are, and I'm excited about it for you guys. That you're just getting warmed up. You guys are in the warm up phase. Yeah,
I got to tell you, that gave me great hope that now that I'm old,
yeah, you guys are. You're just warming up.
I still got a chance, Manny. I still got a chance.
Yeah.
You guys are just warming up.
I thought the stuff for under age 50 was great. So the jumping genes, I thought you should do a little bit more diligence on the jumping genes. And then he concluded he took us through a 5.5 minute walkthrough and I think this is available online. We'll try to link to it. But there's a video of the map, and he unfolds the map. And stage 1, disciplined people. Under that is the word cultivate, and first 2, then what. And then stage 2, disciplined thought. embrace the genius of the and, confront the brutal facts, and then clarifying a hedgehog concept. Stage 3, disciplined action. And this is, again, like you said, his greatest hits, or all of it condensed into, build momentum by turning the flywheel, achieve breakthrough with 20-file march discipline, renew and extend via fire bullets and cannonballs. And then stage 4. So once you've done all that, how do you build it to last? So building to last. So practice productive paranoia. Don't get too hubris and too much, believe in your own press clippings. Avoid the 5 stages of decline. Do more clock building, less time telling. So always make sure you understand the story, how it works. And then preserve the core, but don't get stasis. Stimulate progress. Have new goals, new mountains, new BHAGs. Achieve the next BHAG. And he says, amplified by the 10x multiplier, get a high return on luck. And the outputs, if you do all that, are superior results, distinctive impact, and lasting endurance. And, what BE 2.0 talks about is what he said he would have left out is the people. Mm-hmm. So making sure it's, you get the right people, you work with the right people. We're blessed to work with so many great people here.
Yes.
So Jim Collins did a master class, and he did it in about 60, 75 minutes at World Business Forum. So any final words from you, Manny?
Yeah, no, I would say, it was a great way to get this WOBI conference in New York kicked off with a really dynamic speaker like Jim, who just, he could sit up there all day and talk about the stories and the research. And so, but even after kind of going through the greatest hits, he always leaves you kind of wanting more, which is great. And so I'm thankful that he opened us up, and it was a great conference.
Absolutely. Just a great way to start the day or the 2 days. And just the lineup, as you talked with the other folks about the speakers, it was amazing. And there were some great ones in there for me. So they're like, Jeannie Rometty was a gem inside of that. I didn't expect that. And she was phenomenal. And Will Guidera was unbelievable. Like, I would say he probably ranked as number 1 for most of us. Yeah. But I would tell you, Jim Collins was close. And it was a great time, and it's great to be able to invest. It become that Olympic learner we're talking about, right? And continue to get better and better for our folks.
What do you think of Stephen Ritz? Stephen
Ritz is amazing. Number 1, it's hard to follow that much energy that fast. He probably should cut that in half and slow it down a little bit. But I think it would be so outside of who he is as a person that it probably wouldn't work. He probably caught more than he would have if he'd have tried to do it like everybody else did it. And I think that's why he's accomplished what he accomplished. But to do that much good in the world of one guy that just started it out, like, gosh,
that's cool.
Like, if that didn't touch you here and make some chill bumps go up and down your spine, you just,
So I've spot on. So this was episode 1 in a brand new series on World Business Forum, New York City. WOBI, thanks for letting us attend. We had 10 of us this year. We had 10 of us last year, plus a special guest who went with us, who didn't make it this year. So it was a great event as our senior team, and some great learnings. We did our preview dinner the night before at Quality Meats. We had the big round table. Everyone kind of enjoyed their dessert and their steaks and their food and whatnot. So had a great meal, and it was a great time to kind of get away. And I got a Central Park run in, and it was cold. I need my running gloves next time.
Nice pace there, Charlie.
Anyways, thanks so much for joining us from here at Stories from the River. Bring you fresh new content every week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, wherever you listen to your podcast, or you can check us out on YouTube. So thanks. Give us a like, subscribe, or leave us a comment. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the River. To check out more episodes, visit storiesfromtheriver.com. Join us again next week, and remember to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.